everybody doing? Like, are you all alert and awake? You know, this last MomoCon day.
We're working on it.
You're working.
Yeah, let me try to do this.
That I can completely understand. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your last minute shopping or whatever things that you want to do today to stop by and check out our panel. Using cosplay to break the norm. That's the name that MomoCon made me use. I wanted to call it Cosplay as Resistance because I thought that was way more direct and, you know, honest, kind of. Yeah, we're going to talk about just, the title basically says it, so I'm just going to move to the next slide. I just have to issue this disclaimer. You know, the opinions expressed here are just ours. They do not represent MomoCon in any way, except for the fact that they invited me to come and talk. So don't blame them. It's on me. They didn't know what I was going to say. I also just want to say, you know, this isn't really about your feelings. A lot of times what happens when people are talking about uncomfortable topics, they get caught up in, oh, that made me feel bad. Well, there are going to be things we talk about that's supposed to make you feel bad. You know, people suffering, you're supposed to feel bad about that. People being oppressed, that's a bad thing. So if you do feel that, the one thing I would like to ask is that you sit with that and think about that and why you might feel that way, because that's how you start realizing, you know, how things are being impacted by your thoughts or just, you know, where you might be kind of off kilter in how you're perceiving things. It's a personal journey, and a lot of people, because it does hurt, they like to avoid it. But I would really encourage you to think about that. So our panelists, we are in not the right order of these pictures, but first I have Tanya Woods of Thrill Bills Cosplay. And she is a cosplayer and a costumer. No, she's a costumer who has fallen accidentally into cosplay. And but she has a pretty strong activist background from your family, and basically living in that intersectional space of having to deal with a lot of different things coming at you just for who you are.
Okay, true. That's just
And over here we have Cece the Greek Geek.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a lot.
It is a mouthful. Say it 5 times fast.
Nope.
Okay.
Chana, am I saying that
yes,
right? Chana,
you are.
Okay. She said I said in New York when I said that, and I was like, well, I'm from Philly, so.
Shout out to my family in Philly.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Chana is coming to us from DC actually, and she does actually full-time activist work in basically every aspect. Like your full-time gig is outreach and I'll let you.
Yeah, I've pretty much been an activist my entire adult life, starting with work in college where I did a lot of post-Katrina work and founded the first alternative spring break initiative at Bowie State University. So we did a lot. Thank you so much. Did a lot of work down there. Worked with the Boys and Girls Club, things of that nature. From that, joined the sorority, and now I work full-time for a private nonprofit called the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice.
Okay. And I'm Colin Kell. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with me. I know some of you. I can actually talk with y'all. So again, thank you for coming out. I am a cosplayer and writer. I never really thought of, I still don't think of myself as an activist. When I think of activism, I have a completely different picture of it. More like
Don't look at me.
Well, that's one of the things we can talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to get into that in a
minute. Things we are going to talk
shapes
about. Yeah, what does activism look like
Exactly.
in kind of different forms?
Exactly.
So what I kind of want to start off with is challenging, an assumption that is very, very rampant in this country, which is that everyone's treated equally. Those of us who experience oppression know that's not true. Those of us who occupy spaces, whether it be gendered spaces, race spaces, sexuality spaces, ability spaces, size spaces, all of those things, you learn that you're not treated equally. And life is kind of like a journey of discovering, which ways you aren't. Because for you, especially if you've been experiencing it from, birth, it's normal. And it's not until you're around other people and you see that they aren't actually experiencing the same things that you're like, wow.
Yep.
So it's easy for you. You just walked in and did that? because I had to go and fill out this paperwork and talk to this person. They told me no, I had to come back next week and all this other stuff. And I mean, that legitimately happened. Like one of my wake up calls was I applied for a job when I was on break from college to be a hostess at some restaurant. I wasn't going to do it, but I had a friend from high school who was white. She said, "Oh, the interview takes like 5 minutes. You should go do this."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Cool." I go up the next day. The interview took an hour. He went through everything on my application, asked me if he called the college, would they say I was a student there? Like, and then he was like, "Well, we'll let you know." And so I called her back like, "Yeah. So you said just 5 minutes. That was it, and you had a job." And so, like, and of course, I grew up all Black neighborhood, Black family, everybody around. So, I knew the struggle,
Right.
but it wasn't a struggle. It was normal.
Right.
How about you? When was your wake up call?
Well, it was one of the things. So we actually had very different backgrounds. So I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. And the community I still live in today is a very small Black enclave in the middle of a very affluent white area. So in school, I was always one of maybe 5, 6 Black kids. I think we got M to M when I was in college. Not in college, when I was in high school. And that was the first time that there were other Black kids that I was going to school with that I didn't actually know. And it took a while because I would, for instance, run into people like at the store. And I'm like, "Hey, Susie." And Susie's like, "I don't see you." And it was like many years before I kind of caught on to, okay, well, what's going on here? I don't quite get it. But I think when I finally figured it out was when I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade and we had this May Day thing. I don't even think they do that in schools anymore. I'm kind of old. So we had this May Day thing and they would always pick like one of the Black kids has to be a maypole dancer.
What?
Well, because you got 20 couples out there doing the whole maypole deal. And so they would always make sure that there was one Black kid in the lot. And we had a new person that was doing the organizing that year. And I actually went to her with the note with my name on it. And she chose the white student named Tanya. And I actually heard the conversation in which it was, "No, that's not what you were supposed to do."
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh, well, why is that?" And I mean, it didn't really occur to me still.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very long time coming. I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday, people say, "Oh, you played the race card." That's usually the last card that you're still holding. It's not that somebody immediately defaults to that. It's that you sit there and you're like, "Okay, well, as you said, I filled out the application, I did this, I did that, I did the other thing. I know it's not this, and it can't possibly be that because I have the qualifications, I have the credentials, or whatever it is." And then you're left with, well, this must be the only thing that's possibly left because I know that it's not any of these other factors.
Right. How about you, Chana?
Oh gosh, I've had so many turning points in my life. And to be quite honest with you all, like I sit here as someone who is a survivor of sexual abuse for a vast majority of my childhood. I don't know what it's like to not be sexualized. I don't know, you know what I mean? So ever since I was a little girl, I was sexualized. So there was a mass of this intersection that I was living in, coming up as a Black girl, coming up as a light-skinned Black girl in a predominantly Black community back when DC was known as Chocolate City, and having seen the transformation that it's going through now is kind of like, I don't even know if bittersweet's the word I want to use for it. But growing up, it was just always a need, particularly for me. And as the world got more multicultural and the lines of racism got blurred a lot more, people always feel the need to put you in a box, but they didn't know what box to put me in.
Yeah.
Because once I left DC, I stopped being known as being the, white, they call me white girl because I was literally the closest thing to white at my school. And then, people thought I was Asian, things of that nature. And depending on how I wore my hair or how I would dress that day, there was a very interesting dynamic. And also, not only just because of my aesthetic, but the simple fact that I was in classes that Black people weren't supposed to be in. So by that narrative, I can't be Black. to the point where even some of my Black teachers questioned my Blackness. And, that's kind of where I've been at growing up. And I've just done a lot of work in economic and racial justice. And the more and more I did that, the more and more I realized how the two were intertwined. And like Tanya said, you kind of live in this constant state of paranoia where you're going down the list of what you could have possibly done wrong to be, to have been misunderstood the way that you have. And there's really no other way to justify it but race. And to be quite honest with you, as someone who's, been embedded in the activist community for a long time, do not ever underestimate race in any situation, period. So, that's kind of what we're coming up against now. The feminist movement is at a huge turning point right now because white feminism is basically having to look at itself in the mirror and realize that they're the reason that guy is in the White House. Yep. So, but before I get too political on you guys.
That's really interesting thing. And that's what's really interesting about even doing this panel. The reality is, America is built on social hierarchy.
Right.
Race, gender, ability, size,
exactly.
sexuality, other things you aren't even thinking of that we...
Cisgender identity.
Very much so.
You know what I mean? And like you said, masculinity. So there's always, particularly as women of color, we're always at this crux of feminism wanting to be carried on our backs, and also the civil rights movement having been carried on our backs, both movements since their inception, and yet we are constantly the ones who are thrown by the wayside.
Yep. And we're 3 Black women.
Yes.
Surprise!
Right. I'm saying this, but you're hearing how we are just in the beginning of this conversation, where we had very, very, very different experiences, and they all kind of go back to the same thing. Where the default identity in America, the one that is the normal one, is it's white, or very pale skin, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied. I had to say not fat because a lot of body types fall within the range of acceptability, and but fat is the one thing that is like, no, you can't be that. We're going to punish you for that. That's considered to be the best, and that informs a lot of the way we interact with the world, and the world interacts with us, even if we aren't aware of it.
Yep.
And so I just had some slides that basically gave you demonstrations. There's very clearly a line that happens. You're kind of real interested on that because you fall actually in the normal side.
Right.
Like normal, not other.
Right.
But, and I'm very clearly on other, and have been since. It never even occurred to me that was a thing.
It's very interesting because one of my line sisters, she's getting her doctorate in public policy at Howard. And she's noticing an interesting trend in that it's not only just your skin tone, but it's almost like a scale of balance where if you exhibit other Afrocentric features, such as your hair type, your nose, your eyes, your cheekbones, all those signs that give away your Blackness will, inadvertently put you further down on the spectrum than you thought you were, even though you might, have a normal complexion.
And it's really interesting because, the conversation around Amara La Negra, right? Because she's Afro-Latina,
right?
But if you look at her features, like the nose, mouth, all very Eurocentric in a lot of ways. And so people are having discussion about how we're defining beauty with her because she is sitting right there on that.
Right.
People don't like her because she's dark,
and people still deny her Latina heritage and her Blackness.
Yeah.
Right, you can never be enough.
When you can clearly see both.
Right. And it's when you have personalities like that, or people like that who these conversations are happening about them, that you realize just how politicized our identities actually are.
Yep.
We think that they aren't. We want to assume that they aren't. Honestly, they only aren't for one group of people.
Right.
And that's considered to be the baseline, and everything after that is something where you are being, having points taken away from you socially for being that.
Right.
So I, threw up just so you could see some sizes and so forth, and it's again the able-bodiedness, different body types, some acceptable, some not. Some are borderline, but there's very clearly a normal and an other in our culture that is, quite often curated specifically so that that's all you see, and so that's what is normal for you.
Right.
Like I worked on a communications project where we had to find people who represented this program, a fellowship that they were advertising for. And we were like, oh, we have these people here who could be there. They're right in the office. We could use them for the program. And, one of them was an overweight, dark-skinned Black woman with short hair.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was an overweight white woman. But, they still were just like, we don't want them to represent this program. They wanted to go with somebody who they thought looked more like the program. And
it's a program.
Right.
What program is this?
I can't mention.
But and that's the kind of thing, because you look at these things and it seems so arbitrary, and it's like, how are you going to define this program as a group of people and say these are the people that represent the program that we don't actually even have yet?
Right.
Because that is focused on people.
But that's when you realize just how curated the image in this country is. When they talk about, American Idol. When they would they would disqualify people just on it, they don't look like a pop star.
Mm-hmm.
When you start looking at one of my wake up moments as far as the music industry went was Cynthia Erivo, wonderful singer. I'd never seen her before, but I listened to songs that she had.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw her, she dark skinned Black woman, did not it took me like a full couple minutes to be like, okay, so this is her I'm listening to. Like I expected to see somebody really light skinned with long hair, like I had this whole thing and I didn't realize just how programmed
you were to what a Black celebrity.
This was like in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Like I had a brief music career and it would never fail that I would go to these big music conferences and people would look at me and kind of be like, well, why are you here? And they assumed that I did gospel.
No,
and I was like, no, I do like EDM and down-tempo trip hop with thanks, I guess.
Well, no, when I go to rock concerts and they always ask me for drugs.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like I'm the most square person ever. If I'm in the audience of the rock concert, and I didn't know what they were doing. Like there was all these white kids who just come to me like, and I'm like, hey.
Just as oblivious as you want to be.
And when it happened like 6 times, I was like, why do they come up and make that noise and then wander off? Like, what are they doing? Is there some code? And I was like, and I looked around and I was like, oh, I'm Black.
You're the plug.
They think this is drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even get drugs.
I don't even know what they
I tried. It was hard.
It's assumed that I have drugs. It's assumed that I have drugs because I'm a narc. So I always got drinks thrown at me. That was always my thing.
Oh my gosh.
So when you hear about this, and so like just basically just based on our physical appearances, you just see that people respond differently, and this happens directly in cosplay. When you were looking at the characters in cosplay, the characters that were based on, Dark Phoenix is white, but I come out with my afro and Phoenix, and I'm like, I'm going to be Dark Phoenix. So just doing that is disruptive to the idea of what people expect to see.
Right.
And in a weird way, it kind of makes you a disruptor. It's a form of activism that I didn't realize was a form of activism until I learned how many people didn't do it because they didn't see people who looked like them. So and I threw up a bunch of pictures of different cosplayers who actually are they're cosplaying people who they are not people of color. Mm-hmm. They are not people of, they might have the same body type, they might not be the same gender. I love, I'm going to say it's Les Levi, is that?
Yeah, Les Levi.
Yeah, because he rocks all the female cosplays with a full beard.
Yeah, he's big in the drag community, so he incorporates a lot of cosplay and geek them into his shows. He's really cool.
And it's very in your face. And it makes people uncomfortable to see it.
It is in your face.
They see it, they're just like, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
It's like you have to do something with it. That's one of the things I was like, I don't get it.
Right.
Why do you feel you have to do something with it?
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
When they're like, I don't know what to do with it, why are you even...
Right, just mind your business.
Right.
So... I do ask the question of how do cosplay and activism go together, and it's basically what I just said. It is, disrupting the norms. If you're in the press group, their physical appearance baseline which means as soon as they see you, as soon as you walk into a room,
Mm-hmm.
you are treated differently.
Mm-hmm.
They look at you and they determine how they're going to treat you based on the social hierarchy. And it's really funny, like my government name is very, very, I don't use that here, but my government name is very, very, very Black. All my siblings have really like Dana, Linda, Thomas, and I got something like, Shanique. And that's not my name, but you know what I mean? But it's very obvious from my name that I'm Black. And yet I would have people call, like I would do phone stuff for work, and I'm on the phone with them, and they're like, when I would finally tell them my name, you would hear this other, like, oh, I thought you were, oh. And what happens, when that happens with people, what I've learned is that they are actually mentally adjusting how they perceive you and how much respect they have to give you.
Yes.
I went to high school with a Tisha Smedley, who was very blonde and very Caucasian. And we were both very into journalism, so we had opportunities to go to journalism camp, and we'd go visit colleges, and it would never fail. They'd walk in the room and they'd go, Tisha Smedley? And they'd look right at me. And I'm like, and she would even say, I'm Tisha Smedley, and I would see them look beyond her, like, I heard a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the most important thing to recognize about your own privilege, and really in doing this, I say it's work because, quite frankly, not because it feels like work to me, but because I expect a result from whatever it is that I do. But I think that it's important for you to recognize your privileges and your vulnerabilities and where those two meet and where you are in a white supremacist society. And even if that means you're a woman, you're still in a position of vulnerability, but your privilege might be that you're white or that you're light skinned or whatever the case may be. And it's not that you're getting, free prizes or anything. That's not what privilege is. Privilege is about the struggles and the trials and tribulations that you don't have to face because of how you look.
And I actually just want to have a side note because you said something real quick, and I hate this word so much. I try never to use the word Caucasian ever, because it is very, very rooted in basic crap science. For a very long time,
anthropology was started out as a very crap science that was established to basically scientifically prove that white people were superior and to scientifically prove that white people were the first man, right? Basically.
And so when you use the word Caucasian, which became the scientific word for white, I mean, it's really referring to the Caucasus Mountains, where they said that they had the most pure features of what represented whiteness, and that in that region was that's why they used that word. And so if you ever look through old scientific stuff, you will see where they have done studies to prove that Black people's brains are smaller, that our muscles are just more capable of doing more. Just different. It's horrible.
It was to try to prove the stereotypes were right. And in a lot of cases, they had if you look up, I think it was Cro-Magnon man. And it was a fake skull that they created to try to prove that white people came first. And it was proven to be a hoax. So ultimately the study, which was supposed to advance the white supremacist agenda, came back and bit them where the sun don't shine. So and all of this is not even a Caucasian, but that was a side note. But when I'm talking about as far as, how the cosplay and activism, how do they meet up, being you, doing you, living your life, having fun, finding ways to achieve those goals that don't necessarily support white supremacy. Unfortunately, we live in a country where you kind of have to. White supremacy is the default.
You have to. It's built into everything. So you're going to find things that you have to do to survive that are going to feed into, that's going to support white supremacy. Capitalism. Right. I mean, that right there is It's very much white supremacist, and unfortunately, we all need money, right? Because you have to eat, but it all feeds the machine. It's really rough, but learning to be able to recognize it, acknowledge it, and then still, live your life and feel comfortable with yourself. I mean, it's an ongoing struggle, but it's very, very worth it, because then when you recognize the mechanisms that you're feeding into, then it stops being automatic, and you end up disrupting it for yourself. So when you have, where you default to thinking, this white guy said that it's perfect, I don't have to think about it. Now you'll be like, okay, what qualified that person to say that? Why? Basically, I know it's terrible I say this, but you interrogate whiteness the way you interrogate Black people.
Exactly.
Because, and I've seen this happen. I watched a conversation where a guy was talking about how something was racist, and another guy, it was two Black men, and the other guy said, why is it racist? Why are you saying that? Why are you always taking things out, pulling the race card? And I'm like, what are you talking about? So then a white person came in and was like, well, I'm not sure. I don't think it's racist. And this Black guy who was interrogating the other Black guy went to him and was like, yeah, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I know you didn't mean it the way it happened, and we'll just work on it. And I was like, wait. So you're going to work with him, but this guy you've already discarded because you feel like he did something egregious. Like, but we do that in our lives all the time. Unfortunately, because that is the default here, we're programmed to do that. We are programmed to distrust Black people and to automatically give second, third, fourth, fifth to those who are not. And it is part of that whole social hierarchy. So when I say learn to recognize it, I really want people to learn to recognize it and just understand it when they're doing it. And because at that point, you can start brainstorming on how not to do it, how you can subvert it. If you're not in an oppressed group or you're in a less oppressed group, and I have to acknowledge I have privilege. I, had parents who were very big on education. So they really stressed that. They were very big on, you need to talk this way, you need to read these books, respectability. They said, I went to an Ivy League school that put me in a kind of different position as far as how I view the world and how I interact with the world. But it also gives me leverage in some situations. Some people act like the Ivy League thing is great and it gets you jobs, and it didn't. It actually made people think I was lying on my resume. So I actually got more scrutiny for that. But, I have to acknowledge that having those opportunities and interacting in those circles were, it was a privilege to be able to do that because I was able to see things that I wasn't able to see before.
Right.
I'm also married to a white man, and I use his privilege. I don't know how else to say it. I use his privilege when we apply for our house loan. You know what I mean? I use his privilege. There are things where we'll go places and I'm like, you go do that. I'm going to hang back here. You go ask them about doing this thing because we're going to respond differently to him. And I know this. I know that when we're driving together, it creates a different picture than when I'm driving by myself. I completely take advantage of that. That's not why I'm with him. Because it's hard because his whole family is racist, voted for Trump. I don't talk to him. Like his mom got sick. I was like, good luck with that. I thought we were going to get divorced behind that. Like, because he was big mad. He was like, you're not coming with me to support me? No. Right? I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
You think that? Ooh, we were arguing we were on the phone. It was just like, oh, whatever. Because he went down there and I was like, I'm not going. But if you are in a non or less oppressed group, you need to confront your privilege and you need to think about the ways that you are capitalizing from it or harming others with it. Because unfortunately, the way our culture is developed, it is exploitative by nature. Everything we get, everything we do, someone was exploited to get it. When you get those sale items at the store, somebody is actually getting underpaid for creating that somewhere along that capitalism chain, like what say it, the line I'm talking about, assembly line or whatever. Somebody in the whole process is getting messed over. That is just, part of it. So you have to acknowledge it and that it exists. You also have to listen and learn. I'm constantly listening and learning. I am an able-bodied person, so I don't think about whether or not I can get up on the stage. But when I was thinking about having somebody who needs a mobility device getting up on the stage, I was like, I wonder if they have ramps. That should be a natural default, but it's not, because it's not something I have to deal with normally for me. So I have to listen to what people who are experiencing different, types of oppression than what I'm experiencing are going through, and be aware of that and
Right.
challenge that. I have to sit with the uncomfortable truth that I don't always, like, none of my YouTube videos are closed captioned, which means I've basically made it so that people who have hearing problems can't participate in that. That's terrible. I need to do better. And I sit here and I'm like, yeah, how am I going to do that? Because I still can't, it's expensive.
I thought that was automatic. It's not
done
part
well.
of the software. Okay.
So it messes things up and then you have to go back through and edit it and so forth.
Well,
So
you and I can get together because I actually have software and I used to do it when I worked at that comic book place, and I would be happy to help you.
awesome. Hold those sharing your privilege accountable. And this one is specifically really strongly for Black men. Hold the people around you who share your privilege accountable because you take it for granted.
Yeah, you do. No shade, but shade.
No, seriously, I've seen it happen so often, and it's happened, like, especially in the past couple of years in my life, because I am now so much more vocal about maintaining my space and having people respect my space. And I've gotten so much pushback from people when I do that. I was like, did I not do this before? Because I thought I did, and I realized, I just didn't care about them, so I would just stop talking to people and just move on. It didn't bother me. But if I was trying to maintain a relationship with that person, those boundaries needed to be respected, and they weren't. They were stepping over them all over the place, and then we were fighting, and then everybody's like, oh, that's that angry girl. She's
that
always
angry
angry
Black
about
woman.
everything. Anything you do is wrong. I don't even want to talk to her now, because who knows what's going to set her off. And I'm like, yeah, you want to set me off. You know,
And I think in that, tapping in. I was just at the bar at Stats on Friday, and I was getting something to eat. About to head to the after party where our homie DJ Taylor Senpai was DJing. So anyway, I'm sitting there. There's two guys to my left, two guys on my right, and I'm kind of watching the game, whatever, waiting on my food. And there's the guy who's on my far left. Asked me about the con and stuff because he saw my badge, and then he was asking me who I was rooting for in the basketball game. And I don't have a horse in the race because I'm from DC and all of our teams suck. So, and then I haven't watched the NFL, going away from the NBA, I haven't watched an NFL game since 2016, and I used to watch religiously. You know what I mean?
So you boycotting?
So I'm boycotting until further notice. But anyway, the guy we were watching the game, and he was like, "Who you rooting for?" Before I could even answer, he was like, "You probably don't even know what's going on, do you?" I was like,
that happens all the time. Like my husband didn't even know that stuff went down. Like,
right.
So I have I stick shift. My car's a stick, and I've had it for 15 years now. And year 12, I burned out the clutch finally. You actually really do burn out the clutch. I was like, is something burning? You literally burn it out. But then the tow truck guys came, and I'm like, oh, we need to tow it. I burned out the clutch. They're like, oh, did you? Oh, because the repair place, yeah, I burned out the clutch. Oh, did you? Oh, and he's like, but you had the same clutch for 12 years, right? It's 12 years. Like, he was like, so is that always happening? I was like, that was actually kind of mild.
Yeah.
It gets worse.
I do a lot of makerspace stuff, and it never fails that I show up, especially if I visit someone else's makerspace, not my home space. I show up, and first of all, they always look at me like, why are you here? And I say, oh, well, I came because you're doing this Arduino class and da-da-da. And I actually just had a situation where I took an Arduino class. I've been using Arduino for several years. And like most people, I swipe code. And I had some very specific questions about my current project. And in this class, I ended up basically wasting my time because every conversation became this remedial, let's talk about current and circuits. And I'm sitting there going, but here's my project in my hand. And even, we talk about, doing the cosplay thing, no one ever walks up to me and says, how did you create that armor? I get, where did you buy that and who made it for you? And I'm always like, I made it in my shop. You should come and visit.
Yes, girl.
And it's a constant thing. So yeah, we have to hold people accountable. I have people in my life I have to hold accountable. I have a lot of people who are LGBTQIA in my life, and I have a couple of people who are very not nice about it. And I have to be like, what are you doing? I have to check you on that because you can't treat people like this. These are human beings. Stop worrying about what's going on in their pants. Stop worrying about what's going on in their bedrooms. They are human beings. They deserve your basic respect. And if you can't do that, I can't really be around you.
Yeah.
And that's a hard conversation to have because, you know, some people have been in your life for 10, 15 years.
They're related to you.
Right.
You know, like their grandfathers in this family.
Right.
You know? And yet they are terrible, terrible people. And then it'll be like this one thing. It's like, but you have to do that. And I'm not going to say it's easy. It isn't.
But I think the more that you become aware that it's happening, you do get to a point where you can't not.
You can't tolerate it.
True.
You can't tolerate it.
I'll be honest, and hopefully my dad won't see this. So my dad, he's extremely religious and he's extremely homophobic. And we have gotten to a point that our relationship is fairly strained because he has an inability not to talk about certain things. And I have told him, we simply aren't going to have this conversation. Do you want to talk about the weather? Do you want to talk about your job? Well, I'm leaving now. And I literally have done it. I left him sitting in a restaurant because I was like, I'm not going to sit here. I don't have to listen to your sermon about this. I'm not sure why you're still stuck on that because I've asked you repeatedly exactly why do you feel it's bothering you? And he never has been able to articulate other than he claims it's in the Bible and I keep asking him to point this out to me. Show me exactly specifically what it is that you believe has told you this. And so you get to a point where you have to make a decision because I feel like I'm being complicit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If I sit there and I give it a platform, then I'm no better than that person.
Right.
Yeah, and complicity it's just like you said, it's as easy as not doing anything.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
It's more convenient. It's so convenient, right?
Well, I mean, everything's wired to be that way, though.
Mhm.
That, I mean, it's specifically designed for you to default into certain behaviors and making other
And to
ones
conform.
difficult.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, you know, we talking about racism at work, but we need a job. And you know what happens if you talk about racism at work in a lot of spaces. That means you are unemployed. So you are constantly weighing your survival against actually pushing back on these very important issues on oppression. But it's the deck is definitely stacked against you pushing back on this. So it's always going to be an issue, and you're always going to have to confront, you know, if you can and if you can't, and what that actually means.
And what it looks like.
I
had a really interesting conversation with someone. I don't remember what kind it was. I was at some kind of panel. So in my daily life, I work in marketing, and I am always presented with new products, new messaging, and half the time I have to be like, well, excuse me. I don't see any older people in this thing. I don't see any brown people in this thing. Why are there women missing? Do you not think women will use this product? What's going on here? And one of the people that was in the panel was a young man who is currently working a job in animation. And apparently the house that he currently works in, every project looks kind of the same. And I told him, well, I had a job in which it became very obvious, like it was even said, and these are the ones that we know that Tom is going to ask for. And that's fine, because at least I made them think about it. Because it became, instead of making me call you out in every meeting about why we don't have diversified people because you want everybody's dollars, it's like, are you actually saying that these people's dollars, you don't want those? I thought we wanted everybody's money. So if it's nothing more than to shut me up, that's fine too. Because at least you showed up and you did some research and you got me some more photos, you got me some initial turnarounds, you did, you know, some demographic research, and you found other places where we can run this ad so that I don't have to say it again.
Well, it's not about their comfort. Otherwise, if they did it because they wanted to, then you wouldn't have never had to raise your
exactly. So
first
if
place.
you're doing it now begrudgingly,
I
don't care. At least you're doing it.
I had to do that with, I participate in trivia, and the guy who does trivia for us, it's geek trivia. I'm terrible at it because I'm not that big. I'm a geek, but not that big of a geek. But also some of the things that he chooses is very, very, very much, you know, white America stuff in a lot of ways. And I was like, why don't you have any questions about Black people? Like, at all. Now, what that made him do was come up with weird questions about Black people that I wouldn't know anything about. And then he looks at me like, why don't you know this? And now every time he looks at me when he asks a question, I'm like, okay, so it's got to do something with Black people today. We know that. But now he does it though. And he actually thanked me, which was weird because I'm still like, you don't do enough questions.
She practices. Right. If you had ever been there between poor guy. I'm sure this is like his supplemental gig to get movie money.
I'm just saying, no, but he should. I'm just saying.
You make great points, and he actually, I can tell that he's actually thinking about it. Because he comes over occasionally and is like, okay, well.
But you can't expect to profit off of marginalized people, or you can't expect marginalized people to come behind and support you, even if you are a marginalized person, if you don't center them. Like what?
Oh, are we going to talk about that?
Huh?
Are we going to talk about not centering like marginalized people?
We can. I mean, we can talk about what you want to talk about. This your panel. It's your show.
Oh, I'm good.
Well, we have one.
It's a principal question.
It's not on. Just talk.
My question is, I don't know if you guys have touched on it before you go to the next topic. I was wondering if you talked about intersectionality and how you feel about teaching what intersectionality is and is not to white people, and if it should be done for free or if it should be a part of partisan labor paying.
There's actually a conference, and it's called the White Privilege Conference, and white people can go and be told about themselves. I'm so serious. It's legit. One of my colleagues, her name is Loretta Ross. She's a founding mother of the reproductive justice movement, which is
where is this conference?
I think they have it somewhere different every year. But she goes and she speaks at this conference and she tells white people about themselves. And you can go and learn. Yeah, like it's open for anybody, and you can legit go and like find your, like that's your center for introspect. So there's that in a sense. But I think that also, and sorry to even like jump in on this, but particularly as it pertains to the cosplay community and the con community, we got some stuff that we need to address. We have some anti-Blackness we need to address, some huge anti-Blackness we need to address, including within the Black nerd community. Hold that thought. We have some homophobia we need to address. We have transphobia we need to address, and we have fat phobia that we need to address. But in particular, that anti-Blackness is a mother. And the only reason why I've gotten half the likes that I've gotten is because I look more like Chun-Li than I do look like Tallinn. I'm sorry, I mean to leave you hanging.
So with that said, would you would be willing to put on like a panel or something like that and hope that people come to get educated? Or like that, I guess the biggest question is, you believe in just random education as opposed to
okay. So I'll address this because this is something that's always in like the back of my mind. Like I don't hate talking about these topics, but it's hard talking about these topics. Mm-hmm. The reason I even started writing about this stuff in the first place on my blog and like self-publishing and all is because I was tired of having the same conversations over and over and over again every time some new person didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, you don't know? Here, you can go read this. Oh, you don't know what this is? You can go read that. I'm not going to sit here and talk with you because it was frustrating, and it was every time it got painful. Mm-hmm. So I've reached this point where I'm like, if you want my help, like if you're in my life and you're my friend, I love you. Mm-hmm. It's something somehow or other we bonded in some way. I'm a little more open to it. Right. Strangers, you gotta pay me. You can go to my website. You can pay me with clicks. You can pay me with likes, whatever. You can buy my book, whatever. But you gotta pay me because this is so hard. And honestly, the only reason that's not the only reason, but the biggest reason it started was because there was so much going on in my personal relationship that I didn't realize before. When I got with my husband, when we were just dating. That's when I learned that, for the most part, my circles were all Black and my intimate circles, and his were all white. Mm-hmm. And so then I was finding myself in these predominantly white circles, because his friends, they don't even live like in Atlanta. They were out in Beaufort and coming, and I was like, I don't want to go out there. Like, that's dangerous for me out there.
No,
What are you talking
seriously.
about? So, and then I would be in private conversations with them, and they would just say things, and I would leave and be like, why am I angry and feeling hurt? We never, like, they would be together for like 4 hours, and without fail, at 2 hours, I was like, we gotta go. I can't be here. We went to Helen. I don't know why I agreed to this. I didn't know any better. Georgia, and for it was like a weekend getaway. We're going into little shops in there. They got little mammies and all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, and of course I'm like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And pardon my French. And you're like, what's the big deal? It's just, a little junk. You don't have to buy it. Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just history. I was like, are y'all serious right now?
It's history.
I'm like, and we carpooled up here. I can't believe I stopped talking to him. It made for a real interesting trip. So, like, it's exhausting to do it. And so for me, I've been really big on gathering resources that other people can go to and learn about intersectionality. And if they want more, I'm at that point where I'm like, pay me. Seriously, because it's challenging. And I don't want any person who is in the press group to feel like it is their duty to educate everybody, because it's not. That when you turn around, you see other people have made complete businesses out of educating people on the same topics, but they get paid for it and get paid well because in the social hierarchy, they have a different level of respect.
Right.
So I'm all for people trying to figure out or working together to create opportunities like that for each other to basically benefit from, unfortunately, doing survival work. Because that's what it is.
Well, I guess I'm not going to disagree, but I'm going to say this. So I grew up, my mother is an activist. She is a SALT fellow. She studied at the same place where Martin Luther King did to learn how to lead people in these conversations. And in following her around my entire life, there's always opportunities that she got paid for, and there were grassroots efforts that she did not. And there were opportunities that, she got an honorarium, and that might have been just a few dollars, or it might have been her airfare and travel. And I think, we also have to talk about the obvious economics behind that. And so I don't want anyone to ever be excluded from an educational experience because of the money.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think in some social justice spaces, as you said, there are people that make money, and you go to these conferences and some of them are extremely expensive, and it's just like going to any other trade show.
Oh yeah. And
I think it's great if people have the money that they can do that. That's wonderful. But I think that you also have to provide opportunities for people who they can't travel the distance. They can only engage in certain ways, and I think with any message, you want to have different platforms.
Right.
You want to engage people in the ways that they've become accustomed to engage, the ways that they're comfortable, the places that you can find them and have those conversations. And that might be something as simple as, if you're a college student, maybe in your dorm, you set up a group and you have open conversations. I know when I was in college, I went through this horrible situation where my second year, I was living in the same dorm that I lived in the previous year. My roommate had transferred to a different school. And the first quarter, I didn't have a roommate because they still had people in overflow housing, but they were having to track down where there were actually vacancies because there was no way to do that until you knew that the student hadn't shown up. So I came back to my dorm one day, and there was a person in my room, and I was like, "Hi, I'm your roommate. It's so good to meet you." And she goes, "No," and she left. And I was stumped. I was like, "What just happened here?"
Right.
And like hours later, my RA, who's Black, came to me and said, I knew it was going to be a problem. I was hoping that I would get you before you came home because her parents had written a letter.
Wow.
And this happened often. And apparently it still happens. Where you have students whose parents have written a letter and they said very specifically, I don't want my child rooming with. And I'm like, well, then you need to get your child an apartment.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to a university and they're in university housing, it's going to be whatever. And so we ended up in this horrible situation where she moved out and she stayed in a hotel for several weeks, and then they ran out of money. And now I'm in a room with a person who she's not necessarily hostile to me, But we went through this whole thing where she would take most of her belongings with her every day.
Wow.
And I never forget my very bougie moment in which she had a very small Louis Vuitton change purse that she would always make a big show of making sure she grabbed it and took it with her. And I said, well, Christina, I have 2 Speedies and a whole set of luggage right here. And, you know, and she seemed very stumped by her whole experience with me. And we ended up stuck in the storm room together. And what ended up happening is that we had to go to arbitration.
Oh.
And as a part of arbitration, they sent people to our dorm to talk to everybody because she had wound up a cadre of friends, and her friends all were reporting back they were having this hostile living situation between me and her. And I'm like, what?
Right.
What are you talking about?
Because they keep accusing you of stealing, and you're like, I'm sorry.
I was like, I'm offended and I'm hurt because actually most of my friends were white. Because as I just said, I grew up in a very predominantly white neighborhood. I was like, I was completely stumped in our original engagement. And so we ended up having to have this whole series of conversations, and it came out that other people, you know, had issues, or they had roommates that, you know, we live in this 10 by 10 space together and we don't speak. Or everything I say to this person turns into, it was a hostile attack and I don't feel safe. And so you have to kind of find ways to have open conversations. And as you said, it's always going to be an uncomfortable conversation.
Right.
But, you know, I told her that I don't even know you.
Yeah.
I don't know you.
Yeah.
You came in and you're assuming I'm going to steal your things.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so those conversations actually turned out to be, it was interesting because you suddenly find that there's a lot of people who apparently felt uncomfortable just because they didn't, and she kept going, well, I don't know any Black people. And I was like, well, you had a fantastic opportunity to know a Black person.
Right.
And you immediately go like, no, I don't even want to know you because I already know you.
Right.
Or at least I know who I believe you to be. And by the end of the year, everything was, I'm not going to say it was cool, but it was better. Because there had been this whole situation where apparently white students didn't feel that they could use the TD room because there were a lot of Black students in there. But there were a lot of Black students in there because when you go to a predominantly white university, a lot of times Black sororities and fraternities don't have a house on campus.
Right.
And they don't have a house, and this is one of those racist things. They don't have a house because way back in 19X, these sororities and fraternities got together and they bought houses all in one area.
Right.
And those houses do not change over. Very rare is the case that a fraternity or sorority leaves campus and that house becomes available. If they do have a house, it's somewhere way off campus. So, and usually they're much smaller. Right. And they don't have, you know, honestly, they don't have the funds behind them to go and buy a multi-million-dollar house over on Sorority Row. So instead, they congregate in specific dorms. Right. And so I lived in Delta dorm. And white students that came and ended up in that dorm, apparently it was like a known thing among students. Oh my God, don't make sure that you don't room there. And so some of these people that were in overflow housing, it was because they had actually gotten a notice where they'd been assigned a dorm and they were afraid to come. And it was like, why are you afraid? You don't even know these people. Based on what? So it did, you know, create the opportunity to have these conversations. It's like, what are you afraid of? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
And to get back to your point about having access to, you know, people being able to access it at all financial levels. So all my stuff is on the website. Any essay I've written is on my website. So it's available for free if you know to go to the website. I do these talks at any convention that I think I can get to. And of course, that's open for anybody who has a ticket. And then of course, you do the MomoCon, Atlanta Science Fiction and Fantasy Expo, which is a free convention that they do in Atlanta in March. And people do panels there. I do panels there also, so that anybody can literally just walk in and have access to it if they know it.
Well,
no, anybody at the mall.
Anybody at the mall, yeah, anybody can
with a shirt
on. But
no,
we do that panel, so.
Well, I'm just saying, like, access to information.
Yes, no, definitely.
So, like,
and that's the reason why, the whole reason that we're still trying to keep the con free is because we're having privilege right now. If you are able to buy a ticket and come here, then you are in a privileged spot.
Yep.
And so our whole reason for keeping the event free is because there are people that want to have those opportunities. They can come and see a panel, they can see cosplay, and all of that good stuff for free.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be the second weekend in March next year, so definitely come out and hang with us.
So yeah, and that's sharing resources and opportunities. You know, it's a lot of different things. It's service. It's a financial support. Like I can go to they have tables. If you don't know, the people who have tables here, the vendor tables, they pay
A lot.
pretty penny to have those tables.
Yeah.
When you go to smaller conventions and all, the tables cost a lot less. And
Or they cost a lot more.
I don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's
some
one
that-
time where it's ridiculous.
There's a couple that charge a whole lot.
Yeah, but some of them will have them be a lot less, and that actually increases access and so forth. So those are ways that, you know, people can partake in being kind of, you know, more activist centered,
Right.
and, you know, providing something, you know, or at least helping build the community that you'd like to see.
Right.
Other ways that you can do, and this is actually, I think, is a very, very big thing for people. Support independent artists. I talked earlier about how we have a very curated view of what is appropriate, what things should look like in this country. And that is something that's maintained, especially in larger organizations, larger corporations. There are more people who are involved in saying, this is what's going to be good, this is what's bad, this is what passes, this is what doesn't.
Right.
Independent artists make whatever they want. And so they're going to have stories that you can't get in the mainstream because the mainstream doesn't either thinks that it's, you know, anti-American,
Right.
whatever that means, or immoral in some way. So if you want to find those types of stories, if you're interested in supporting people who are writing those types of stories, you have to go to independent artists. There are a ton of them downstairs, and at smaller conventions, that there will be a lot of those there.
Mm-hmm.
So support smaller conventions. This is that Geek Space thing. Go to those. Visit the people, talk to the organizers, and even at bigger cons like this, if you talk to the organizers, you know, you say, "Oh, I attended that panel that Colin Kell did. That thing was awesome.
Yeah,
give us the rating." They invite us back.
Yep.
They ask us to do certain things for them.
Yep.
And that way, it makes it so that these conversations continue to happen.
Yep.
You know. Donate time and services to people and causes that you care about.
Yes.
Time for a lot of people is the
Time
most
is worth
important.
more than money sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
They need people to help man like projects that they're doing or provide certain services that they don't have. Like when I was talking about the captioning, you know,
Right.
You need to find, you know, they can help with the tools that you need to actually make things more accessible for people.
Yeah.
You know, activism is not just being out in protest. That's part of it.
Right.
You know, protesting is part of it, but it's not just that. You can do it in almost any part of your life in some way. And sometimes it is, like I said, just as simple as I'm going to be out here and telling my story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to share what's going on in my life because honestly, I didn't know about your childhood. And, you know, unfortunately, that's something that is not an uncommon experience.
Exactly. It's very normalized.
Unfortunately, and it's horrible. But, you know, you don't know how normal it is until someone actually is brave enough to say it.
Yeah.
Like, I started streaming, like, on Twitch and being more visible in these geek spaces and maker spaces because I realized that there weren't people like me. A lot of times, right now, I'm doing Black Casticon in 2 weeks. You're going to be there 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And it's always trying to get more people into cosplay, and you hear the same couple of things. I'm afraid to do it because I'm concerned about what the backlash is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have the money, the skills, or whatever to do it. And a lot of that is driven by if you go and you look on YouTube and you Google cosplay, crafting, or whatever, you tend to see a lot of the same people.
Mm-hmm.
You see younger white females, you see older middle-aged white guys that have Tony Stark's basement, and there's this perception that you can't get anything done without, a whole pile of money and a Patreon account and all this kind of stuff. And so I actually started kind of putting myself out there, even though generally I'm actually kind of a private person. So like I struggle with social media because I just don't think, why would anybody want to see every minute of my life? But so people are always like, you don't post enough. I'm like, no one needed to see me like paint that for the 15th time. But I think that's important too. So that's kind of more the look that my part of this takes is making sure people know there are people that look like them out there, whatever that is. And so I always encourage people, if you want to do something go and do that thing. There are no spaces that are defined for you. You define those spaces for yourself.
Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, a number of people come to me now and it's like, oh, you know, you have to see this cosplay I decided to do because I saw you out there, and and it's awesome. This one, oh my gosh, she made like this huge axe. I was like, oh, she looked like she measured something.
Right.
Like, she used rulers and, you know, I don't even know, like real paint.
technology.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, I used some hot glue, y'all. But yeah, no, people do that, and yeah, you don't realize that how much impact just you being out there and sharing your truth actually changes the world.
And don't,
you know,
yeah.
the people, you know, a lot of the things that happen to people, the horrible stuff, the reason why it keeps continuing is because people are silent. They think that they're, well, in a lot of cases, it's true, the backlash for actually talking about what happened is so great, and that is also intentional in our culture. So if you were doing something that you don't see anybody else doing, you are brave, you are a soldier, you are paving the way for people behind you. That is activism.
There's a question. I don't know if you can see.
I can't see.
It's actually not a question. Sorry, no. I can't see for cuteness. Actually, just I wanted to mention that for me as a mom of 4 kids, from 3 years old to 23, I'm half Hispanic, and my eldest looks it, but the other ones are like pale and blonde. And also just as a femme person and broad range of that in my family, it means a lot to me to see the spectrum of cosplayers in places like this, because I feel like it pushes their perception of what the characters can be and what they are until it becomes like normal.
Right.
Yep.
Like my eldest will actually mark on like different body types or different skin colors that maybe didn't match with the character. But the youngest, it doesn't even occur to them. I've noticed they're so used to coming to the cons now. We went to the event. It was great. You should go. Very small, but really good. Bring your own food.
Trust me, I fight for the users because I have this ongoing fight with the mall about food trucks. I'm gonna try it again this year, y'all. I'm trying.
When a 7-year-old won't eat nuggets, there's a problem. But yeah, it means a lot to me to see people. I mean, I want everyone to cosplay and look exactly like a character did on the screen.
Right.
But I think that for me, that's where the activism is really important, because it's really changing. It alters the elder people like me in their 40s perception a little bit in a good way, but it really just changes the entire landscape. For
children, yes, exactly.
Younger kids who are seeing this happen in front of them, and to get those pictures,
right,
to show their friends.
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you.
And you see that now. These, you know, this generation, the Generation Z, I think it is. I'm a millennial, so I don't know. But Generation Z is like really, I'm so impressed by them. And it gives me so much hope for the future, because my God, people in my generation and older just are trash.
And, you know, I mean, I'm trash.
Yeah. And I think it's important to go back to your points earlier about what can you do in this community, because it not only changes the perception of what a cosplayer looks like, but it changes the perception of what a superhero looks like and what a hero looks like.
Yeah.
So it's important for you to educate yourselves, but also don't be afraid to tell your own stories.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I would encourage you all to find a mentor, whether it's literature or, you know, whether it's Tallinn or Tanya or myself, and know your limits, know what you don't know, and find people who are well versed in those topics to find out. You know, that's the reason why I'm here.
There's no shame in explicating ignorance.
And it's no shame it's no shame in admitting what you don't know. And that's why my friends list is full of PhDs, because even though I have a degree in social science, which let me tell you, in a sea of social media where everyone's a freaking expert, as a social scientist, it's like, okay, it's like nails on a chalkboard. But I think it's important for you to recognize people who have those credentials and people who have done the work, because your story is important, but you cannot define the worldview by just your story. Because as a sociologist, I can tell you that numbers don't lie. You know what I mean? And they speak to overwhelming patterns and trends, which will ultimately back up your stories a lot of the time.
Yes, that's very true. Oh. No, go ahead. And then,
so first, thank you for having this panel. This is wonderful.
Your glasses.
Second, how do you mitigate the pressure to go out and be all of those things that you didn't get to see for yourself?
I don't understand the question.
So I'm bi-ethnic, I'm South and East Asian, I'm transgender, I'm bisexual. I don't get to see that like anywhere unless it's some kind of character creator where I get to make that for myself. And I feel like I want to do everything. I want to be I want to be an animator, I want to be a voice actor, I want to be an artist. Like I want people to be able to see me because I didn't get that. But I can't do everything. Like
I can't do everything, but I can do something.
So what is it that you want to do?
right now, my main focus is being an environment artist for video games.
Do it.
That's what I'm working on.
All right. I mean, that's seriously. You like you said, you can't do everything. I want to do everything. I really do, and I try. And I'm stretched too thin. I'm sick now. But you have to. But you also, when you start doing it, you find other people who are interested in doing what you're doing.
Right.
You know, and you are able to build collaborations with people. I can't do video editing. I have zero interest in it. I found someone who is interested in it, and but she doesn't want to be in front of the camera.
Right.
So she's like, here, you do the video stuff, and I will actually produce the videos for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you will find, as you go out and do what it is that you are meant to do, you will find other people who are also in that same kind of lane, interested in doing those types of things.
Visibility is important. I mean, there's probably other people at the house right now that will see you and be like, well, wait, if she's doing that, I can do that too, and then seek you out.
It's true.
And, it's weird because you start having these interactions with people. They tweet you and they come on your Facebook and they're like, I saw that you did so and so. And you weren't thinking it was that important at the time because you were living your life. That's pretty much it. You know, I'm always living my life, and I always joke that I'm an only child, and so it's never occurred to me that I should be concerned about what anybody else is thinking or doing, because I'm always competing only against myself, and so I've always just kind of lived my life, and you discover that people have hindered themselves because they have these internalized conversations where they think that they can't do a thing because I don't see anyone that looks like me, or I don't see anyone that's from the same background as myself doing that thing.
Right.
And so just go be you and live your life.
Exactly.
And that alone is an example for so many other people.
Yeah.
And just on a quick thing, I always tell people about the difference between being a consumer and a seeker. It's very easy to be a consumer. It's very easy to go to Target and on Amazon and to take what they readily offer up to you in very brightly colored packaging. If you want to see and experience material that includes people like yourselves that have stories that you want to read, you have to make an effort and seek those things out.
Yeah.
And there are literally hundreds of lists on the internet that you can Google, and people have very carefully curated and made long lists of web comics, mangas, films that are about people like you, whatever it is that you're wanting to read about. Right. And you can very easily go and do that. And it might take you some extra effort to get this thing. You might have to go on somebody's personal website and order it from PayPal or whatever. But do that, because there's no way to change the narrative when there isn't economics behind it. It's very difficult to convince a larger studio. And you always say, yeah, but it was Black Panther. The thing about films like Black Panther is that it's very, very easy for them to say that that was a one-off.
Right.
And that it was a fluke, and that other factors, like the political climate right now, may have played into the sales for that film. So you have to prove to them that it's a repeatable event, and that means that we have to support those things. And we have to make that effort to do that.
Okay, we'll take your question, and then we have to I think there's something coming after us. So.
Cool. My question is kind of similar to hers. I'm a children's book illustrator, and a lot of books I work on are about social issues and mental wellness and everything. And before, that's kind of how I choose to be an activist right now. But before, I used to do a lot more groundwork, like grassroots stuff, protesting. And being an artist, I don't have as much time to do that now. And I kind of feel weird about not having the time to do that and kind of not being everywhere. So I guess my question would be do you guys feel any type of insecurity about not doing everything or how
not doing enough?
Oh yeah, all the time. I tell people, how in the beginning I said I don't consider myself to be an activist because I won't go out on the ground. I'm like, I admire people who do it by a lot. I'm not trying to get tear gassed. I'm not trying to get tased. I'm not trying to get arrested because, and all of those tools are specifically in place to make it difficult for people to actually be able to function after they are caught up in that. You catch a charge, how much more difficult it is to get a job. That's very intentional. So I'm a coward in that sense, but I own it. You know, I say, what else can I do? What tools do I have that I can use to help other people? So one of the things I do is we do interviews with creators, like basically I work with Black creators and I put them on the YouTube channel that nobody watches, but the people also get their own video they can use for their own marketing, you know, and they have it as something, a tool for them. It's a resource. I like to write about different, you know, creators and so forth. I'm a strong writer, so I'll do things like that. You know, you find the ways that, you know, that help enrich you because it's exhausting. I know it has to be out there doing the grassroots all the time. Very high burnout. So you literally take care of yourself.
Block out time. Like I do a lot of support work for other people. So I do web work. So there's a lot of other social justice websites that are like, my back end is jacked up, can somebody please come and help me? And it may be, you know, with your art, there are so many organizations that need art, they need logos, they need layouts, whatever. Those are ways that you are still helping the cause, even though you might not necessarily be able to devote the time to go out and, you know, pamphlet or speak every week or something like that. And it's something that usually they come to you and oftentimes they're like, we just need it done.
Right.
It's not going to be done by next Wednesday. We just want to get this thing done.
Right.
And you can kind of fit it in between your other projects.
That's pretty cool.
There's a couple of websites, I'm bad with remembering things, but there's a couple out there that match up creatives with organizations that need work. And so you can Google that, and one of them is something fire. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, you can Google it, and they have a list of opportunities. They do it by state and locality, and you can find people right in your community that would love to have you come out.
So now that everybody, like people are really coming into the next panel, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you. And we'll be around. Actually, you saw we have our social media handles. We're actually pretty responsive for the most part. I'll be down on the con floor actually in another hour, and I'm not sure where you'll be, but I guess both of you will be here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So feel free to come
I
talk
would
to
love
us
to
or
talk to
anything,
you.
because we are here. And enjoy the rest of your time.
Yeah.
Ladies, can I get a group shot?
Yes, please. I would love
So
to.
sorry, I'm terrible.
Yeah, sure. Give me 1 second.
I legit want to chat, but I gotta go too. So
Okay, yeah, no worries.